Welcome to the session on project life cycles. We are going to be discussing that in detail to understand what are those project life cycles. I'm Yogesh, your trainer, welcoming you on behalf of Edureka for this program. So to start with, the agenda what we have for this project management workshop is basically to understand on the various life cycle activities what we do when the project starts and when the project ends. We would be able to cover up all those items. But before I do that, let us understand what's this project all about. So in brief, project is taken up to deliver a certain product, services or result. When you deliver all these things, we do that in a progressive elaboration style. If we have to look into the definition of project, it would be project is a temporary endeavor which is undertaken to create a unique product, service or result, and project would be terminated when we have achieved those objectives. Why we are using a word called temporary? The reason is there is a start date and end date. So we are having a time frame by when we should be finishing a project. Why we are using a word called unique? Because such kind of output may not have been produced before. Now you'll be surprised, how can I differentiate between project and operations? Let me give you a small example to relate to project and operation. Let us talk about prototype of a car. Let us assume that Toyota or Hyundai or maybe Honda, they are planning to launch a new car and they have created a prototype. So creation of the prototype is actually a project because this is unique, and the same prototype or a same car is not available already. But when you manufacture same car daily basis in your manufacturing plant, this becomes an operation because the uniqueness is gone now. It's the same product which is getting manufactured everyday basis. So that is something which we call that as an operations. Now operations and project, they go hand in hand. Sometimes we improve certain characteristics, we improve certain results of the operations and we take a project. I'll give you one more example. Construction of a hotel building is a project. Managing day-to-day guests, banquet hall, services, restaurants, that's an operation. Now, within the hotel operations, let us assume that one particular hotel is having an occupancy rate as about 35%. So they want few people in the organization to take a project to improve this occupancy rate from 35% to about 65%. So this can be a project which we can take it for 3 months to a 6 months time frame. This will be called out as a project. Once we deliver the project, that means once we improve that statistics, we'll hand this project back to the operations team and they'll try to deal it on a day-to-day basis. So that is what is the difference between the project and operations. Now, I wanted to introduce this term which is called as a project management. So how do we manage the project? What are the benefits projects are going to be providing? Why do we need projects? Now, projects may be required because of certain business improvements, because of maybe you wanted to introduce new technology. It could be a customer request. It could be a business need. It could be an opportunity also. It could be because of certain political changes. There are many such examples which are there in our environment to look at on various projects, and you will figure out why that project is getting executed. So the benefits what project management brings us is basically timely completion, better financial performance, better quality. We have been able to control the scope changes. We can actually have a predictability. We can actually avoid rework and project overrun. And we will be able to handle the risks amicably. These are certain advantages of managing the projects. Now, if I have to give a definition of what the project management is the discipline that helps you in implementing various processes, various methods, various knowledge and skills, and experience for achieving the objectives of unique project. So this is how we would maybe define a project management all about. Project management means we need to deliver the product, service of result in a given timeline what's agreed in the beginning. Since we know that the process of project management can be pretty big, pretty hectic, cumbersome, So we are trying to break down this into 4 simple phases, which will help us in understanding the overall project life cycle. So it is from that perspective, we would like to break down them into 4. Actually, there are 5, but we'll try to categorize that as a 4. And then we'll go forward in understanding that in detail. So let us understand what's the project management life cycle. As you know, we have been regularly using a term called initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and control, and closing. So one side, if I look at, these are my 5 process group. But if I try to look at from a different perspective, initiating is something when I start my project. That stage is initiating stage. The activities which are there in initiating stage are activities such as finding out the business case. That means business reason why we are into this project. Working with sponsors to get the charter document created. Find out what are the customer's requirement. Finding out who the stakeholders are. These are few of the activities done in initiating. Then comes of planning. Planning is like preparing a proper plan of each of those items what we have to deliver. Planning would also mean talking about the individual knowledge area plan, also working out on the 3 key things, which is scope, time and cost. So we'll prepare their baseline. The baseline means approved and signed version of scope, that's scope baseline. Cost baseline is like approved costing of the project. Similarly, you have a schedule baseline, which is an approved time from the management. And the word baseline means that these are certain plans which are approved by the management, and after the baselines are done, any changes to be done in that plan will have to follow a change request process to the management. Project manager is an authorized person who can carry out those changes, but once the baselines are signed, the authority of change goes from project manager to the senior management. The particular word which we are using in a senior management who's responsible for maybe responding to the change request, that's called as change control board. In short, we call that as a CCB. Once we have completed the planning, we would have a project management plan in hand. And when we are going to be in execution, we would be executing what has been planned. Sometimes it's also called as Plan, Do, Check, Act, PDCA. Check and act is like monitoring and control. D is like do, do means execution. P is like planning. Project management life cycle is also a kind of plan, do, check, act. That means there is a continuous improvement what is required. The monitoring and control, actually that's something which is continuously going on from the time you start the project. So in a nutshell, I'll consider the monitoring and control to be a regular feature irrespective of what stage we are in. We would be continuously monitoring and tracking on what's getting delivered and how we are doing it. So this is something I consider that as a regular feature. When I talk about of the 5th line item here, which is closer, closer means towards the end when we are able to give the deliverables to customer. Customer is accepting the deliverables and we are closing that project. That's the time we are referring to the closing here. Closing also would mean administrative closure, financial closure, any such open items what we are going ahead with. If there are any ambiguities between customer and project manager or the project and you feel like that's not resolved and something which is still hovering and pending, even in closing stage we would prefer to speak to the sponsors, document those things if it is still maybe not getting addressed, because project has to close on the given times. So if at all there is a situation wherein with mediation also we are not able to resolve it, then we document those changes so that the PMO or the other members can deal with it if required. Initiating, planning, executing and closing. And in between I'm talking about of monitoring and control, which is a continuous activity which happens. So these are the stages which are going to be continuously going on one by one. In pharmaceutical industry, the name of the various life cycle items would be discovery, screening, preclinical development, registration, post-submission activities. So that could be a name of the various life cycle stages. If I talk about of a software development life cycle, you will have stages such as requirements gathering, analyzing, designing, coding, testing, deployment. So these are going to be my various stages in the software project life cycle. If I compare the same with the construction industry, the stages of project life cycle would be feasibility, concept, detailed scope, detailed design, procurement, construction, commissioning, handover, and close. So that means the life cycle stages are followed in every industry. However, the name could be different. In each of those life cycles, when we talk about, there may be various phases for us. So these phases can vary from industry to industry. But what is more important when we talk about of the phases, that they may be established based on various factors in an industry, which could be from management needs, which could be from the nature of a project. So these are few factors which would be influencing the different phases. And more than anything else, we also try to use a word called phase gate. That means whenever one particular phase comes to an end, we call that as a phase gate. Gate means there is a review supposed to happen. So there is a person standing it who would like to know why you are moving. Have you done the deliverables yet? Have you not completed the deliverables? So the word gate in terms basically relate to end of a phase and second phase is starting up. And we would like to cross check our deliverables, our performance. And the reason of using phase gate word is basically this helps as a decision point. I would call that as a go or no go. Should I proceed or should I terminate? That kind of a decision is actually taken up at that level. So every phase gate, we have a choice to relook at whether things are getting delivered as they were desired or there is something to be done separately. So these are few things what we would be paying more importance when we talk about of project management life cycles. When I talk about of initiating, we said initiating is the beginning. Initiating is like when project is getting final and we are finding out various resources. We are finding out purpose of the project. Why are we getting into this project? What's the benefit this can bring into our organization? That's something which is done in the initial stage itself, wherein we do mainly two activities. First is finding out the business justification and preparing a charter document. And the second is identifying who the stakeholders are. So these are few things which are done in the beginning itself or the initiating. When we talk about off planning, we try to get into the details of every planning, mainly scope, time and cost, but this is a planning to be done for all the 10 knowledge areas. Rather, we would better call that as a planning of all the 49 processes, how we are going to be using those processes, where we need to customize, what needs to be customized. I'll give a small example. Let us talk about of a process called as plan communication management, which is part of planning. In order to understand what generally we do in this process, please ask a few questions and you'll get to know what kind of a planning is required. Question number 1, what needs to be communicated? Question 2, how this needs to be communicated? Question 3, who will communicate this? 4th, at what frequency you will communicate? 5th, what format will you communicate? 6th, who should be receiving this communication? See, when I start asking all these questions, these are something what are supposed to be getting discussed in the each of the planning processes here. So the questions what I asked are the questions we generally ask during plan communication management. And the strategies and the answers, how we are going to be doing this, who is going to be doing this, all this gets documented, and that is something which is basically the plan of my communication. We call that as a communication management plan. So this is maybe a rough idea for us to relate on how is the planning done for each of those processes there. Now, how will you do control cost? How will you do control schedule or any of the other processes? That also gets discussed in the planning itself. So basically, the planning process group is carrying the skeleton of how are we going to be doing the remaining set of processes as well. And of course, we try to do a deep dive in terms of gathering requirements, breaking the requirement into smaller, more manageable line items called work package, then trying to estimate it from the time perspective, cost perspective, and preparing the baselines. So all these kind of jobs are actually done in the planning. So when we complete our all processes of planning, that is where we are ready with a document called as project management plan. And this becomes the basis throughout for project performance, project appraisal, and for team performance and team appraisal. Moving next, we are clubbing monitoring and controlling and execution. And as we said, the monitoring and control is a continuous process which has to be done starting from the beginning itself. Now the processes what we have to use for executing the project and doing a monitoring and control. Monitoring and control is to do with tracking, looking into the milestones, what was agreed and how is the progress. And more than anything else, when we are into the monitoring and control, we are actually continuously looking for compliances to our project management plan. And at the same time, in monitoring and control, the one big thing what we do is like comparing our project management plan and the current progress to understand, are there any gaps? Are there any items which call for an action now? And this action could be initiated in the form of a change request. Very commonly, this is called as a CR in many of the organizations. So the process of initiating a change request, giving it back to the change control board, also is the process which is done in the monitoring control process group itself. And the deliverables what we are producing, that's part of our definition as well, that the project is supposed to be delivering unique product, service or result. So even verifying that deliverables are meeting customers' specifications and requirement, giving it to the customer so that customer is accepting the deliverables, which we call that as the accepted deliverables. So even those activities are also done in the monitoring and control. And last not the least is like closure, wherein we are trying to do a formal closure of our project, including procurement, including all other activities. This generally happens in three situations. First situation, when project is coming to an end, which is I would call that as a normal closure. Second situation, when a phase is coming to an end. And third situation, when project is getting terminated in between. Then also we'll have to come to this situation. Few key activities what we do while we are in closure is basically releasing the resources. When you start your project, you may take resources from various teams inside of your office or even from maybe few outside vendors. So when we come to the closure, we also release the resources. And before release, we wanted to make sure any lesson learned, whatever we have which is not documented so far, we'll document. And we'll try to archive these documents, ensure the payments are scheduled and the formal sign-offs have happened with the clients and vendors. So that's something which is done towards the closure. And finally, we might release a project report as well. So that's the activity which is done in the closure side. Now, the activities what we carry out in each of those phases, this may vary from industry to industry. Let us talk about of the activities when we start. So when you define, when you develop, this kind of an activity, we call that as an initiating. Planning talks about of maybe starting from initiating till about monitoring and control. That means till such time deliverables are not handed over to the customer. All that kind of activities, I would consider that as the full planning which is going on consistently. Then comes up the execution, monitoring and control. Truly speaking, that begins when the project starts and it only ends when the project finishes. The efforts might increase when we are towards the deployment and we are about to start delivering many things to the client. So that's the stage, maybe the resources would start going to be coming down. So that means once we have started doing the deliverables, maybe we are very close to the monitoring and control phase. After that phase, there is a decline in terms of the resources requirement. There is a decline in terms of the total manpower requirement from that perspective. So that's a consistent decline we have. And in the last, the stage, what we call that as the closing stage, when we have delivered, we have handed over the deliverables to the customer. That's the stage we come towards closing, which is called as finish. Now, as I said, the name of various activities or the phases would vary from industry to industry, but the basic methodology, the basic understanding, that remains the same throughout. So that's the main thing what we wanted to cover up here. And this dotted line represents the consistent monitoring which happens. So with this, we come towards the end of the session. And to give you an idea, Edureka is the global REP for PMI and regularly delivering many programs and many sessions of PMP and ACP. In case you would like to enroll for a program or you have questions about similar programs from us, we would be happy to assist you and guide you in the right direction to ensure you achieve your success with certifications along with us. If you have any queries, feel free to write back to our team or visit our website. We'll be delighted to serve you. Thank you so very much for joining in this session.